Welcome to Wild, Women in Lending Determined to Make an Impact. I'm your host, Robyn LaVassaur. They say our biggest fear isn't being inadequate. It's being powerful beyond measure. In this podcast, I will share how to break through imaginary ceilings, lean into success, discovering your purpose, and understanding how to create the business and life of your dreams. From failures to triumphs and all the tactics in between, let's jump into the wild arena together. Welcome back to Wild. We are talking today about something that could hurt your heart. Not everyone is going to love you. What does that really mean in business? Well, it probably means that, I know that it means not everyone's your client. And that's a hard pill to swallow from time to time. Have you ever felt the sting of rejection? We know that we are very well trained as human beings that when something hurts or stings, we tend to start shying away from doing it on repeat, right? Especially if it hurts too much. And yet, even Garth Brooks wrote a song, right, about unanswered prayers, right? Jamie Lee Curma, I believe, wrote the book Worthy. And one of the things she says in her podcast is rejection that she had to make in her mind was rejection is God's protection. Man, she spun something that ultimately stings into something that said, be okay with this because there must be something that's going to come after it, right? There must be a win that comes from this loss or this ouch. In sales, that's a very interesting mindset. And in loans, especially in a seemingly harder market, a little more scarcity for many people, it is incredibly hard to not want every single deal to fall in your lap, right? For every single deal to fight tooth and nail. And yet, the sales math in general proves time and time again, based on laws of averages, that not everyone is going to be your client. Now, if you can think about that metaphorically, how many shots go in that a basketball player shoots? How many hits does a baseball player get when they're up to bat? How many songs does an artist record that make it all the way to number one? Well, if you really look at it, the law of averages probably plays out time and time again. And then your greatest of the greats just improve that law of averages to a little higher level than somebody else was able to. Loans are no different, nor is real estate. And so let me give you a formula that feels a little bit like a sting. And yet also, I think it's incredibly empowering to just recognize that, hey, maybe this isn't personal. It doesn't mean I can't continue to develop. It doesn't mean that I can't increase my odds. But what it means is there is a math and a formula to this that if I trust the process and the work, I know the results will come. So let's talk about what that is. First of all, a third of your clients or your perceived clients, your future clients, simply won't qualify. So if you were to generate 100 leads, a third of them would just not be able to complete. You think about that again in all different areas at all different times, right? There's always going to be people who simply can't take the next step forward. They don't have the financial means, the qualifications, whatever that may be. In that moment, they can't move forward. So the non-qualifiers. Number two are the people that are really well referred or personally, right, in the sphere, and they love you. And they love you no matter what. They love you because they already trust you, because somebody they know edified you. Whatever the case, you hit it off during the appointment. You had some great moments. You're lock and step. They meet and they don't want to work with another loan officer on the planet. I just got a text today from a client who it's been years since I heard from them. And they were like, can I ask you a couple questions? Like, you're our trusted source. Those are the clients that ultimately love you. Awesome. Feels good. Super great to have them. In fact, everybody probably would attest to, I need more of those. So what's the other third? If it was a third, and a third, what's the other third of that pie? It's the people that aren't your clients, period. And it can be for a myriad of reasons, but ultimately, most of the time lately, it's been for shopping, right? Is all they care about at the end of the day is the very cheapest of the cheap when it comes to fees and the cheapest and the cheap when it comes to interest rate. And if that is the only thing, period, that matters, for some, it might be a loan that you can't technically do, right? Documentation. It might be hours that they expect of you or the amount of fee worksheets they want you to do where they're not your client. It might be a loan that is too challenging for you where they are ultimately not your client. But the number one that we see often right now is ultimately the shopper. And there are a few tips and tricks that I can give you to really help with, one, the perceived rejection, right? And this can go in both ways. So I'm talking about the client, but I can also, I will actually get to the realtor part and or the referral partner part of this, because that also has a formula to it. And it's really the same formula because it's sales math, but then how do we overcome that potential rejection and how that feels? Well, when it comes to clients, I will tell you this. The clients that are going to shop you should be able to know up front. And so you might have a great initial meeting and walk through everything, go through their most important thing, and hopefully you are actually following a process that they understand and that you're in control of the entire time. If you're not following a process, that is breaking basically rule number one, right? You want to make sure that you have followed all of your steps so that you can trust or tweak your formula, right? If it's not getting the results that you need. But if every time something's a little different, how in the world are you going to say, I see what you're doing? And so think about this. If you were to go to a golf lesson and swing a club, they would watch you swing a club and they would realize, oh, you're dipping your shoulder, right? You're not rotating your hips. Your hands are set up the wrong way. And eventually they would tweak little things in how you swung the club over and over and over, right? And find things that ultimately then had you in a more consistent swing. Now, once in a while, you're going to default back to those old habits. But when it comes to a sales process, I cannot stress enough for both, and really anybody that's delivering service or goods in the way of sales, to make sure they're actually covering it in a formula or a written out process. And so you go through everything with the client and you're talking to them and you ask them, one of the first things that I ever talk to a client about are, what are the most important things to you? And we go into them. And here's the deal. What I find is that people that follow this formula, they often ask the basic questions, but they never get a few layers deep. And so I can't encourage you enough to actually get a few layers deep, not only about thank you for the answer to my question, but why is that answer your answer? Tell me more. Define that for me. Because underneath the very surface answer is a little more depth that will help you fully acknowledge, right? And so I'll give you an example. I had a loan officer the other day say, mom and dad told their kids who are buying a house to shop, and to not trust a lender, only trust a bank. Well, I can tell you, when you're a lender and those clients are sitting in front of you, they might not be your client, right? And so there are a few different tips and tricks that you can use to make sure that, hey, are you comfortable? Are you going to choose me? Are you talking to anybody else? And so one of the questions that I ask all the time is, who else is advising you outside of a realtor or myself about the transaction? Who else? Now imagine, again, you're a doctor and somebody comes in and starts telling you all sorts of things about your profession, about your potential diagnosis. You might wonder, where did you get that information, right? You got it off of Google. You got it off of Grey's Anatomy. You got it off because your dad is a doctor. And now I know dad's a doctor and there is some advisement coming from there. It is no different in lending, right? Who else is advising you on this transaction? They might say, my CPA, my financial advisor, my parents, my grandparents, our friends who have bought multiple houses, whatever the case, my significant other who's not here and not on the loan. Very big deal to understand who else is advising. That's just a basic tip that you should have as part of your sales process. When you know that, what have they told you thus far, right? We're going to get into the details. As I go through most important thing, which is rate, payment, cash to close, and house in no particular order. Let me say it one more time. Rate, payment, cash to close, and house in no particular order. And then with each category, trying to dig and make them explain the why, and then put them in order, right? Order them out. At that point, we are literally going over all the things that are important. And if they say rate, what's important to you? It's the only thing. I want the lowest rate absolutely possible. I can tell you guys, we all know at any given time, at any given day, a rate can get lower with another lender, right? For all different reasons, whether it's market, went down the day after you locked, whether it's a shiny flash sale online, whether there are more points involved, there's a buy down, there's so many details that take place. But when you have a borrower that tells you point blank, rate is the only thing that matters to me. They're stoic. They're maybe not engaged. They don't care about any of the other details. They don't care to give you more information about anything. They might not be your client. And so when you're mad that they leave, are you mad at yourself because you still thought that you could make them your client and you gave them way too much time, way too much energy, way too much effort? Or are you mad at them for leaving? Because if you do your job with a beautiful sales process up front, you generally understand and can test the theory. And I'll give you kind of a sideline to that up front with whether or not you need to spend more time on that client. Have you ever had somebody take your time after hours, have you write pre-approval letters, have you edify the listing agent to the buyer's agent, how good and solid their pre-approval is per se, how good the client is, send it out on a Sunday night, whatever that may be, and then they leave you for rate on somebody that didn't answer the phone on nights or weekends. Ugh, it stinks. It stings bad. And so it happens to everybody. And I will tell you, a dear friend of mine, I know she wouldn't mind me even using her name, spoke at actually a sales retreat that we just had. And she is a pro's pro, 20 plus units a month, boots on the ground, always in the thick of it. 20 plus years of originating and one of the best in the nation. I have so much admiration for her as a mom, as a boss, as a loan officer. She's just truly one of the gems in the business. And she said, I gave it my all with a client. I did everything picture perfect, from the sales presentation to the follow-up, to the customer care, to the agent strong referral. It was all there, and they still didn't use me. Ouch, right? And sometimes we pause and we think that's all about me. Well, a whole nother day on a whole nother podcast, I will tell you, one of the 4 agreements is never take anything personal. And I'll tell you what, it's truly not personal. It's what they value the most. And sometimes we can't give them that, right? If somebody wanted to travel the world and all the other things lined up beautifully for us to potentially date or be together, but my biggest value was spending time with family and being at home, and their biggest value was traveling the world, are they really not choosing me, or are they choosing something that holds the highest value for them? Never take anything personal, you guys. And that is something that in sales will help you so much to understand, hey, I'm simply going to talk to the client. I'm going to have them map everything out. I will tell you, when we do most important thing and a client says, it's rate, I will literally tell them, so here's the deal. And you can use these lines all day long. I'm competitive. I am not cheap. So if interest rate is the number one thing that matters to you, and it's the only thing that matters, meaning that if it is a like-for-like loan on a like-for-like scenario, and the only thing that matters is whatever the lowest of the low interest rate is, then I am not your gal. Because the lowest of the low interest rate doesn't do what we just did in all of the information around what your most important thing is. But if that's it, I'm okay. I just want to cut you loose now so that you can go chase that lowest interest rate. And basically, I will tell them, and one of the things I can do as a service to you is put your information online, bankrate.com, email and text, and you will have more offers than you could ever imagine, with every single one beating the next one, especially if you show them the fee sheets. And at some point, you probably will get the very best interest rate for that day. And here's all the things that comes with, right? And I'll talk about the fears, and I'll talk about the risks, and I'll talk about the experience. Now, if that doesn't have them moving, right? If they don't decide at that moment that, you know what, I understand. And what I find so frequently is that when someone says, well, I'm just not the cheapest, that's not a good enough way to say it to where it could move or influence the client. It's really about talking to them. And so I'll say, hey, did you know that sellers have the ability after an accepted offer with a pre-approval letter to not let you switch financing? That's why I don't want to be the one to issue you a pre-approval letter in the state of Oregon, because I don't want you to be stuck with a lender that you don't want to choose. So you might lose a few houses with that low interest rate lender because they're not trusted by the listing agent. They're not known by the seller. They don't communicate strongly. Whatever the circumstance be, you might lose a few houses, but you have a really good chance of getting the super cheap rate. That's called ultimately a takeaway close, right? A takeaway close where you're talking to a client. It's not manipulation. It is the truth in a way that can hopefully influence them to say, rate isn't always everything. But it's so interesting because if you aren't willing to press in and really test the theory of are you or are you not my client, you will invest and invest and invest and invest, and then you will feel scorned and hurt and frustrated by their ultimate decision. It's no different than meeting with referral partners. And I will give you a quick story around this. I would meet with a referral partner, and again, I'm a mom. Everybody knows that, with 5 kids, and my husband and I live very busy, especially weekend lives as the kids we're empty nesters now, but as the kids were in sports and different things. I would sit down with an agent so excited that they were ready to meet and they would have a great business. And I would, what can I do for you that adds value to your business? We'd be having conversation and they would say to me, I want you to be at an open house with me Saturday and Sunday for 2 hours live and in person. And we would talk about it. And I would realize I'm not the right fit. Now, the very worst thing that people can do is say, okay, I'll be that for you when you know you really can't be that for them. If you can be that, awesome. Somebody will be able to. But I realized quickly, gosh, why is that important to you? We dig in and might go through some other sales process and get there where we could work together. But imagine if I was just like, okay, that's great. Like, I plan on doing that. And then I went 1 weekend or 2 weekends and fizzled out and it didn't last. I can't really be mad at the agent for not using me, if you will, because I didn't give them the expectation that, hey, you might not be my client and I might not be yours, right? We might not be a good fit together based on the logistics. It's okay. And we do this well in our long-standing, really great relationships that we have. Imagine a marriage where you never talked about expectations, right? Where you never really knew what the other one expected, wanted, liked, enjoyed, and all of a sudden you're married and you're like, well, we got to figure this stuff out. That wouldn't be the case. And so with clients, we want to really understand what they're looking for, what are the priorities, and am I really the right person to serve you? And one of the great things that you can do is limit the amount of time that you are giving to people who are potentially not your client so that you can go out and find all of the people that absolutely love you, right? That know that, hey, you're my lender, you're my person. And I think the scarcity mindset in the current marketplace has us sometimes swirling where we're holding on for dear life to just one. And we get so focused on that one that we even forget to pay attention to all the others that chose us and loved us because we're so focused on the one piece of rejection. Don't do that to yourself. Believe in yourself and bet on yourself. You know what? I'm clear on what this client wants, and I'm clear that I'm not the one that's going to be able to provide it. So I'm going to take away clothes. I'm going to push that back. I'm going to let them know, like, hey, this is where things are going to land with me. And I'm okay with you walking away because that frees me up to go serve more people, to go find more potential clients for myself. When you can generate and you trust yourself to have the ability to generate enough leads, that pie gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And all of a sudden, the third that you're going to have, maybe a little more depending on how good your skills are, is plenty. You've got plenty to eat out of that pizza and you are happy, 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 and know that it's going to come in the next month. I hope this was helpful to you. We'll see you on the next episode of Wild.